The corridors of the palace trembled with distant echoes of war, muffled beneath layers of titanium walls and ancient alien stone. Queen Xyrella stood motionless in the Hall of Echoes, her obsidian armor catching the flicker of 1,000 bioluminescent glyphs that pulsed with ancestral memory. She didn't blink, didn't breathe too deeply, as if doing so confirmed the worst. Before her, the throne, once adorned with banners of victory, was draped in mourning black, and beside it, a silver pedestal bore the only thing left of her daughter, a shattered comstone soaked in dried blood. The war had raged for a decade, brutal, senseless, forged in xenophobia and ambition. The humans called it defensive war. The Xerati Empire called it justice. Between them lay 1,000 systems scarred by orbital strikes and burned soil. And in the middle of it all had been Princess Ceres. Ceres had not been born for battle, yet she wore it like second skin. Even as a child, she moved with a precision that unsettled generals and comforted warriors. She questioned strategy, defied doctrine, and often stood against her mother in the royal chamber with clenched fists and fire in her voice. But when the war reached its darkest chapter, the siege of Nine's Rift, Ceres vanished. The mission had been unauthorized. She'd stolen a stealth skiff and led a unit of volunteers into contested space to rescue captured citizens. When the Queen heard, she launched a retrieval fleet. They arrived to find a battlefield reduced to vaporized rock. The only trace was a warp transmission, Ceres' voice cracking through static. "Tell her I tried." The galaxy mourned a hero. The Queen mourned a daughter. Weeks passed, then months. Ceres became myth, an emblem printed on recruitment banners and chanted in rebel songs. Queen Xyrella buried her grief beneath protocol, ruling with renewed ferocity. Where once she had tempered war with diplomacy, now she ruled with fire and ice. Her council praised her resolve, but the soldiers whispered of sorrow eating their sovereign from within. Inside the private sanctum of the royal spire, Xyrella stood before the last star map Ceres had used. Her fingers traced the route Ceres had charted, through uncharted human space, toward an anomaly too faint for scanners to follow. Xyrella had reviewed the data 100 times. But the anomaly remained, a sliver of possibility, a whisper of disobedient hope. "Your Majesty," said a voice from the archway. Commander Valeth, her most trusted blade, stood at attention, his armor bearing the scuffs of another border skirmish. "There's been another incident near the human expanse. A skirmish, but something strange. One of our patrols reports a ship bearing old Imperial markings." "Another scavenger?" she asked without turning. "Unlikely. The signature codes were active. Clean." She faced him now, her eyes narrowing. "Which codes?" Valeth hesitated. "Ceres' personal encryption." The silence that followed felt like a shift in gravity. "That's impossible," she whispered, not in disbelief, in fear. Valeth stepped forward, lowering his voice. The outpost tried to pursue, but the ship jumped before they could lock coordinates. But they recovered an image. "We've scrubbed it from all systems." He handed her a projection crystal. With a trembling thumb, she activated it. A figure, tall, armored, striding through a corridor lit in cold blue. Blonde hair, a posture that defied protocol but demanded attention. Ceres, older, leaner, but unmistakably her. And beside her, a human male in dark tactical gear. Xyrella clenched the crystal so tightly the light fractured. We're triangulating possible destinations. But the ship's modification suggested originated from a rebel scrapyard, human-controlled. "She's alive," Xyrella murmured. Her heart pounded with something raw and wild. Relief? Fury? Valeth said nothing, but his stance changed, more guarded, uncertain. He had served Xyrella long enough to know the wars she fought in her heart often caused more damage than those fought with plasma. She turned to the map again. "Prepare the palace guard. No public declarations. No alerts. If my daughter walks this galaxy, I will not lose her again." Valeth bowed and vanished like smoke. Alone again, Xyrella let the mask slip. Her shoulders trembled. She sank to the floor, knees striking cold stone. For the first time in years, she wept. Not for what she had lost, but for what might still be reclaimed. On the other side of the galaxy, the ship cut through the void like a ghost. In the cockpit, Sarah sat with her jaw clenched, eyes fixed ahead. The years had changed her, scarred her in ways the Empire could never have imagined. Her once glimmering silver eyes had dulled to steel, and the insignia on her collar had been torn away long ago. The human sat beside her, silent, his gaze flicking between NAV data and Sarah's expression. He knew better than to ask what she was thinking. They had come too far for questions. "We're close," she said, her voice rough with fatigue. "To what?" he asked. Saris looked at him then, something ancient in her gaze. The truth, and a reckoning. Behind them, the ship's cargo bay held a relic recovered from a forgotten battlefield, an artifact encoded with memories, betrayals, and evidence powerful enough to shatter the Empire's fragile peace. Saris didn't know if her mother would embrace her or order her death, but she did know this. The war wasn't over. Not for her. Not for any of them. And as the stars thinned and the Imperial beacons glowed faintly on the horizon, the past hurtled forward to meet them. The Queen believed her daughter had died a martyr. Now, she would face a return, alive, defiant, and not alone. Rain fell in sheets, turning the desolate plain into a mire of black mud and rusting wreckage. The remnants of what had once been a forward operating base jutted from the ground like the bones of a long-dead beast. Crushed helidrone wings, twisted railgun mounts, and scorched mech frames littered the field, silent monuments to a forgotten clash. And among it all, nestled in the shadow of a collapsed tower, lay the half-buried cockpit of an escaped skiff, still glowing faintly with alien energy. He had found her there, unconscious, covered in blood that shimmered silver in the rain. At first, he'd thought she was dead, like the rest of them. But when he leaned close, she had stirred, her hand snapping up his throat with terrifying speed. Her eyes, metallic, defiant, searched his face, then dulled again, and she collapsed. That was 7 rotations ago. Now, Sarah sat across a dim fire beneath the shattered dome of a ruined bunker. Her long hair was tangled and unwashed, her bodysuit patched with human scavenger tape, but her posture remained regal. She stared at the flames like they held a riddle only she could solve. The human watched her from the other side. His name was Darren, a former captain in a human rebel faction long since disbanded. His armor had been stripped of all insignias. He had stopped fighting a cause and started fighting for survival years ago. But when he pulled that alien princess from the wreckage, something shifted. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe something deeper. "You still haven't told me your real name," he said, voice low. Saris looked up slowly. "Names are currency. You trade them only when you must." "Then let's pretend we're rich," he said with a dry smile. She didn't return it, but her eyes softened. "Saris, daughter of Xyrella, first of the 13 bloodlines, princess of the Zerati Empire." Darren leaned back, exhaling through his teeth. "Royalty. Figures. You've known," she said. "I suspected. The way you speak. The way you don't flinch." "I flinched," she muttered. "You flinched like a soldier, not like someone afraid to die." They fell into silence again, broken only by the hissing wind slipping through the bunker's cracks. Outside, strange beasts called to each other in the dark. Creatures that had grown bold in a galaxy too, distracted to notice. "You could have left me," she said finally. "You should have." "I did consider it. But something about you said, this one's trouble." She turned her gaze fully to him now, studying his scarred face, his tired eyes. There was no malice there, only resilience. She had seen that same look in the eyes of the soldiers who'd followed her into Nyan's Rift. "I remember falling," she said. "Not from the ship, after, falling through time. Waking up days later with half my ribs cracked and my memory like fog. I wandered, hid, fought scavengers who thought I was salvage. For weeks I lived in that wreck. Why didn't you call for help?" Darren asked. "There was no one to call," she said. "By the time I reached the working terminal, I'd already heard the broadcasts. My name on tombstones. My mother's voice delivering my eulogy." He didn't press her. She appreciated that. "I watched as my people turned me into a martyr," she continued. "But no one questioned the coordinates. No one searched deeper. I realized then my disappearance wasn't an accident. Sabotage. A betrayal, she corrected. Someone within the Empire wanted me gone. Darren's jaw tightened. Why? Because I questioned the war. Because I spoke to human prisoners. Because I believed coexistence was possible. That made me a threat. He sat forward. And now I have proof, she said. Names, codes, recorded transmissions, buried in a relay station only a few clicks from here. I need your help to retrieve it. Darren nodded slowly, already aware that this was more than a favor. It was a mission neither of them might survive. They moved at dawn, navigating shattered canyons and dead zones where sense of mind still blinked weakly. The relay station was half-collapsed, buried under a landslide triggered by an orbital strike. Together, they worked through the rubble, silent, efficient. They moved like soldiers who had nothing left to fear but failure. Inside the ruins, Saris activated the remaining power cells using her biometrics. The core hummed to life, revealing encrypted files sealed behind royal clearance codes. She hesitated. Then, with a steady breath, she pressed her hand against the panel. The system recognized her. The data spilled forth. Darren watched as holograms flickered to life. Recordings of council meetings, intercepted transmissions, and most damning of all, a message signed by High Executive Varn, her mother's advisor, authorizing the sabotage of Sarah's mission with cold precision. The betrayal wasn't random. It had been orchestrated from the heart of her own empire. I knew Varn despised me, she said, voice tight. But this is treason on a galactic scale. What do you plan to do with it? Return. Deliver it to my mother. Force her to see the truth. She may not believe you, Darren warned. Or she might think you're a threat. I am a threat, Sarah said. To Varn, to the lie the Empire's been built upon. But not to her. They left the ruins as dusk bled into the sky. Their ship, an old, patched long-range skimmer, waited for them in a nearby gorge. As the engines warmed, Sarah stood at the edge of a cliff, staring into the stormy horizon. Darren approached. You really think she'll listen? She loved me once, Sarah said. I have to believe that love still lives, buried beneath duty and grief. He didn't respond. Instead, he placed a hand on her shoulder, light, respectful, steady. I won't let them take you again, he said. She turned, and for a moment, her mask cracked. Grief and gratitude mingled in her eyes. She reached up, took his hand, and held it. Neither spoke. When the engines roared to life and the skimmer rose into the clouds, the galaxy seemed to hold its breath. Far behind them, the relay station's lights blinked out. Its secrets carried now not in silence, but in two hearts prepared for war. And far ahead, beyond the veil of stars, the Empire waited. So did a queen, and with her, a reckoning. The Imperial star cruiser Velshar cut through the void with quiet menace, its silhouette a gleaming predator cloaked in shadow. Aboard its command deck, Queen Zyrella stood beneath a domed viewport, her hands clasped behind her back. The stars ahead shimmered with icy indifference, but her gaze was fixed inward, upon the storm rising behind her eyes. Across the command table, Commander Val shifted uneasily. He had served through 3 major campaigns and countless covert operations, but never had he seen his queen wear her silence like armor. The image of the transmission replayed in his mind. Saris, alive, walking side by side with a human, her expression unreadable, her posture regal, yet altered, like a statue brought to life with fire rather than marble. The outer sentinels had detected movement near the Veil sector, Valeth reported. Long-range scans confirmed the ship's signature. It matches the vessel from the recovered transmission. Zyrella's eyes narrowed. Pursuit? Discreet. We've scrambled interceptors under Ghost Protocol. They'll keep their distance until you give the order. She said nothing for a long moment. Then, with a breath so shallow it barely stirred her cloak, she whispered, Bring her to me, unharmed. Valeth inclined his head. And the human? Alive, she replied coldly, but under restraint. I'll not have him speak before I do. As Valeth left, Zyrella turned back to the stars. Her thoughts were a maze of hope and suspicion. The daughter she had mourned, her only child, was alive, but altered, shadowed, Not the girl who once stood at her side in council chambers or trained beneath twin moons with a warrior's discipline and a philosopher's heart. What had Sarah seen out there? What had she become? Saris felt the gravity shift before the alarms did. The ship rocked slightly, turbulence caused by a nearby disruptor field. Darren tightened his grip on the controls, eyes darting between the HUD indicators and Sarah's expression. "They found us," he muttered. "They let us find them," she corrected, standing beside him. "This is a control maneuver. They want to rattle us, not destroy us." "So we're walking into a trap?" Saris met his gaze. "No, we're stepping into judgment. But not theirs, my mother's." The Queen's personal guards were first aboard, cloaked in obsidian armor, their weapons sleek and silent. They moved without speaking, a disciplined phalanx guided by unspoken orders. Saris and Darren offered no resistance. She stood tall, her hands raised, not in surrender, but in dignity. Darren kept his eyes on the guards' visors, reading the tension in their stance. He could tell they weren't used to handling prisoners like this. One of them, younger and less composed, flinched slightly under Sarah's gaze. Even in restraint, she commanded the air around her. They were escorted through winding corridors of polished alloy and luminous etchings, each line inscribed a verse from Zerati Legacy. Saris knew every symbol by heart. She had walked these halls in childhood, learning diplomacy from dignitaries and subterfuge from her tutors. The past echoed around her, but she held herself still, like a blade sheathed in silence. Finally, the doors to the throne chamber parted. Queen Zyrella stood alone upon the dais, her crown dimmed, her face unreadable. The guards fell away, leaving Saris and Darren in the center of the vast, silent room. Zyrella took one step forward, then another. Her gaze remained locked on her daughter. "You are not a ghost," she said at last. "Not a memory. Not a dream." "No," Saris replied, her voice steady. "I am the consequence of your silence." Darren bristled at the edge in her tone, but Zyrella remained composed. "You vanished," she said, "and the stars wept for you. We built monuments, sang your name in the halls of flame. You buried me," Saris shot back, "and never asked why I disappeared." The Queen descended the final step. "I trusted the reports. I believe your death was honorable." "It was convenient," Sarah said. She reached into her cloak slowly, drawing out a crystal orb. "Until now." Guards stepped forward. Zyrella held up a hand. "Let her speak." Saris activated the orb. The air shimmered as recorded transmissions played. Voices, cold calculated, spoke of sabotage, of eliminating a political liability. Zyrella's face remained still, but her fingers curled inward. The final voice, Varn's, filled the chamber with surgical malice. "The girl will be remembered more usefully as a martyr than as a dissident. Ensure the wreckage is convincing." Silence followed. Even the guard seemed frozen. Zyrella stepped back. Her expression fractured, just for a moment. "I knew Varn was ambitious," she murmured. "But this—" "You gave him power," Sarah said, "while I bled on foreign soil." The Queen's eyes flicked to Darren. "And you in all this?" He raised his chin. "The man who pulled her from the wreckage, who kept her alive when your empire called her dead. You trespass on royal ground. I walked beside your daughter when no one else would. That earns me more than your disdain." Zyrella stared at him for a long time. Then she turned back to Saris. "Why return? Why not remain hidden?" "Because hiding changes nothing," Sarah said. "Because I still believe the Empire can be more than this, but not under liars, and not without truth." The Queen was silent. Then she turned and ascended the dais once more. "Leave us," she commanded. The guards hesitated. "All of you." Even Darren looked at Saris, uncertain. She gave him a nod. He withdrew. Now it was only mother and daughter. "You were always too bold," Zyrella said quietly. "Too unwilling to accept limits." Sarah stepped forward. "Limits are not the same as wisdom. You taught me to see the stars clearly, but you let grief blind you." "I lost everything," the Queen whispered. "And I lost you," Sarah said. Not to death, but to duty. Zyrella turned slowly. And now, Sarah said, we choose whether this empire remains a legacy of fear or becomes something new. Their eyes met, and for the first time in years, they saw each other not as ruler and rebel, not as sovereign and ghost, but as mother and daughter. The chamber dimmed, the orb still glowing faintly at their feet. Far outside the throne room, Darren stood between lines of silent guards. He didn't know what was being said. He didn't know if Saris would emerge free or in chains. But he had seen the shift in Zyrella's eyes, the fracture, the pause. He knew the war wasn't over. But maybe, just maybe, the battle was changing. The chamber doors opened slowly, and Sarah stepped through them, alone. Her posture was rigid, her face unreadable, but her eyes held the weight of a storm waiting to break. Darren straightened from where he'd been leaning, watching her with the cautious hope of someone who had walked through fire, and now waited to see if the burns had been worth it. "Well," he asked. She hesitated. "She's not our enemy." "Not yet." He nodded once, understanding what she meant. Not an ally, not a foe, something in between, a fragile thread connecting mother and daughter, stretched taut between truth and tradition. Behind them, the palace hummed with unrest. The revelation of Varn's betrayal had begun to ripple through the court. Advisors whispered, guards exchanged glances, and deep beneath the royal archives, hidden files once locked away began to circulate in secret channels. The foundations of the empire were shifting. Zyrella had not arrested Varn. Not yet. Saris knew why. To do so publicly would invite a schism. The council was riddled with his influence. A purge could shatter the already fragile unity holding the 13 bloodlines together. But to do nothing would be worse. Darren followed Saris through the side passages of the palace, their steps echoing down ancient marble halls. They moved like ghosts, relics of a war that had ended for everyone but them. She was guiding him toward the hidden chamber of the Flamekeepers, a council older than the court itself, composed of those who remembered the empire before it was an empire, when it was just a coalition of starlit tribes. "They will listen," she said quietly. "They remember my voice. And if they don't, then we light the fire another way." The chamber was buried beneath the palace, accessible only through biometric passage and encoded memory triggers, remnants of an age when secrets were kept in living minds, not data cores. As the door slid open, a cool light revealed 6 figures seated in a circle around a crystalline pyre. Each Flamekeeper turned towards Saris with expressions ranging from cautious respect to wary disbelief. "You are returned," spoke the eldest, a woman with skin like polished stone and eyes of nebula glass. "I bring proof of treachery," Saris replied, "and the will to correct it." They listened, as the data from her orb filled the room with damning light. The pyre pulsed, sensing truth, registering tension. When the recording ceased, the silence was long, contemplative. "You name a traitor who walks beside the queen," another keeper said. "To act is to risk civil fracture. And not to act is to permit rot at the root," Saris countered. "If the Flamekeepers still serve the empire, then serve it now, by purging the shadow in its heart." One by one, they lowered their heads. Then the eldest stood. "We will convene with the queen. You have sparked a motion. Let it carry through." As Saris and Darren left the chamber, he leaned toward her. "That went better than I expected." "I didn't expect it to go at all," she admitted. Outside, a storm brewed over the citadel. Black clouds cut with violet arcs of energy. The Empire's orbital weather control systems had been disabled, another symptom of the chaos slowly rising. In the streets, murmurs turned to marches. Loyalists of Varn and those calling themselves Children of the Phoenix clashed with word for now. But soon, Saris knew, the fire would leap from tongues to blades. When Zyrella met them again, it was not in the throne room, but in the war chamber, surrounded by projection maps and rapidly updating tactical reports. Her expression was stern, but her armor bore no ceremonial flourishes, only the clean lines of someone preparing for conflict. "The Flamekeepers stand with you," she said without preamble. "That gives me the leverage I need. Varn will be removed, but not by decree, by trial." "Public?" Saris asked. Zyrella nodded. "Broadcast to all sectors." He will be exposed, not just punished. His network will collapse from within. Darren folded his arms. And if he doesn't come quietly? He won't, Sarah said. And he didn't. That night, Varn attempted to flee the palace under the guise of diplomatic transport. He was intercepted by neutral guard factions loyal to neither him nor Saris but to justice. His capture was swift, but not clean. In the struggle, several guards were wounded. The court would spin it as a failed abduction, but those close to the truth knew better. The trial began within 48 hours. In the Hall of Echoes, beneath the prying eyes of millions tuned into every system, Varn stood stripped of title, but not of pride. He denied everything, called the recordings forgeries, accused Saris of manipulation, and even cast suspicion on Darren as a foreign infiltrator. When Saris took the stand, the room held its breath. Her voice was calm, her gaze steady. She did not speak with venom. She did not rage. She told the story of the crash, of survival, of betrayal and rediscovery, of a human who showed more honor than her own bloodline. The Empire watched, and for the first time in decades, its people saw not just a princess, but a leader, one born not from lineage, but from fire. The verdict was unanimous. Varn was guilty, but punishment was not execution. Saris insisted on exile, to a penal moon where he would live stripped of power, forced to confront the consequences of his ambition. Xyrella agreed. It was a new tradition being born, one shaped by justice rather than vengeance. When it was over, the court adjourned in silence, but the people roared. Outside, beneath the sky, finally cleared of storm, Sarah stood beside Darren on a balcony high above the city. The lights below glittered like stars, and for the first time, she felt like she was floating, not in exile, but in return. "You did it," Darren said. "We did it," she corrected. "But this is just the beginning." He turned to her. "You're going to rebuild it, aren't you? The Empire." "Not rebuild," she said. "Reforged into something better." She looked toward the stars. "A throne is only as strong as the people beneath it, and I've seen too many thrones built on bones." Darren was silent for a while. Then he asked, "And me? Where do I belong in this?" She faced him, truly faced him, and in her expression was no doubt. "You belong where you've always been, beside me." For a long moment, neither spoke. Then she reached for his hand, and this time it wasn't gratitude. It was in partnership. The wind caught the banner above them, the sigil of the Empire cracking in the breeze. But already, artisans below were crafting a new one, a phoenix rising from both human and Zerati design. A symbol not of dominance, but of union. Far above, satellites began transmitting the new creed across the stars. One voice, carried in thousands of languages, announcing the dawn of a different empire, not forged by war, but reborn by those who refuse to be lost. And as the message echoed across the systems, people listened, not to a queen, not to a soldier, but to a daughter once thought dead, who had returned, not alone, but with a human, and a vision that could not be silenced.